everyone, and welcome to this virtual rally for the 48th Annual March for Life. I am Jeannie Mancini, and I'm proud to serve as president of the March for Life. The March and our movement is made up of Americans from every racial and ethnic background, every walk of life, and every faith tradition. We are mothers, fathers, sons, daughters, Democrats, Republicans, and independents. But despite these differences, we are all united by our common understanding that every life from the moment of conception is precious. Now, we're going to begin our rally in the same way that we do every year with the national anthem, which will be performed this year by Matthew West.
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rockets' red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And so let us pray. Almighty and eternal God, we give you thanks for the great gift of human life. While you created us individually and uniquely, you also created us to be in community with each other. Life unites us, and you are the source of all life. We seek your blessings on the vast, diverse, and energetic pro-life movement in our nation. We lift up every single person joining in this virtual rally today. Although separated by physical distance, together we are united in you. Each of us has been given unique talents, passions, and roles to play in building a culture of life where the beauty and dignity of every person is valued and protected. In these challenging times of pandemic unrest and new threats to human life, help us to seek peaceful solutions that always respect the lives of all people, born and unborn. We especially lift up any pregnant mother in need and those who have been wounded by abortion. In unity and in solidarity, may we walk with them in their time of need. Almighty God, please pour out your graces on all our efforts and make us strong together, united in life. This we ask in the name of our Lord Jesus Christ, your Son, who lives and reigns with you in the Holy Spirit, one God, forever and ever. Amen.
The Knights of Columbus, through countless acts of charity, affirms the dignity of every person. This service is fundamental to our principle of unity, and nowhere is our commitment more important than in our stand for the sanctity of unborn life. I pledge to you, the Knights of Columbus will stay at the forefront of this noble cause.
Each year, we choose a theme for the March for Life upon which to build our message. The theme we choose is one that we hope is needed at that particular time in our history. With all of the division and unrest, with the fear in our country, we felt strongly that this year's theme should call for a time of coming together, a reminder that our background and unique missions find strength in the truth and in working together to protect the voiceless. And so, our theme for this year is Together Strong, Life Unites. Our theme is meant not only to highlight the unity of our cause, but to also highlight the destructive and divisive reality of abortion. Abortion divides a mother from her child. The abortion industry has deceived women into believing her pregnancy is a disease, that her motherhood means giving up her dreams, and that only abortion will solve her problems. Nothing could be further from the truth. Abortion also divides a man from his fatherhood. The industry attempts to remove men from the picture through the my body, my choice narrative. In doing so, abortion really enables men to walk away from their responsibility instead of instilling a sense of duty to protect and care for his child and her mother. Abortion divides the world from love. Every tiny child brings love into the world. Every life lost to abortion is a loss of love in this world. One of my favorite quotes is, "How can we possibly say there are too many children? It is like saying there are too many flowers." Abortion divides us and our world from reality. Calling a baby in its earliest stages a lifeless blob of tissue doesn't make it so. Reality is not arbitrary. You can't change truth. The abortion industry denies a scientific fact that human life begins at fertilization or conception. Life, on the other hand, unites. As we enter the beginning of a new presidential administration, one that has signaled they will make divisive pro-abortion, pro-death policy decisions like forcing taxpayers to pay for abortions here and abroad, while also sending more government funding to abortion providers like Planned Parenthood, we ask President Biden to consider unifying pro-life policy decisions, policies that are supported by the clear majority of Americans. Like those 3/4 of Americans who believe abortion should be limited at most to the first 3 months of pregnancy. Not any time in pregnancy, including up until the moment of birth. And let me be clear that at the March for Life, we know that any abortion is one too many, but our laws in this land do not even reflect what the common American stands for. And like the nearly 6 in 10 Americans who do not want their taxpayer dollars being used to fund abortions here in the United States, especially in our neighborhoods at organizations like our nation's largest abortion provider, Planned Parenthood. And like those 77% of Americans who believe taxpayer funds should not be used to fund abortions in other countries, something allowed by rescinding the Protecting Life and Global Health policy, which is popularly known as the Mexico City policy. Instead, we call on President Biden to unite America. We call on the president to enact life-affirming, unifying policies. And I invite you, all of you participating in the march virtually, to join us in calling on our new president to protect the most vulnerable by texting the word MARCH, M-A-R-C-H, to the number 73075. Let me say that again. Text the word MARCH, M-A-R-C-H, to 73075. In a few hours, we will text you a link through which you can directly contact this new White House and members of Congress, alongside hundreds of thousands of pro-life Americans. I really hope that you will take this opportunity to use your voice in defense of the unborn. We may not be together in person this year, folks, but we can still send a very powerful message to the White House as they begin the earliest days of their administration. Let's tell them that every life matters from the moment of conception. Please do that today. Mother Teresa reminded us, you can do what I cannot do, I can do what you cannot do, and together we can do great things. Like our theme tells us, each of us has something critical and irreplaceable to contribute to the fight for life. Everyone is desperately needed, so please join me in being together strong, because life unites.
Well, hello, everybody. My name is Matthew West, and I just want to start by saying what an honor it is to be part of the March for Life. I was so looking forward to gathering with thousands of you in Washington, D.C., but nothing's going to stop us from still gathering with this virtual rally and celebrating the preciousness and sanctity of life. I want to sing a few songs, and I hope these songs will fire you up. I hope they're going to encourage you, and I wanted to pick some victory songs, and I want to start with a song called Hello, My Name Is. This song is a reminder that discovering who we are begins by discovering whose we are and what our God says about us. 1 John chapter 3, verse 1, how great is the love the Father has lavished on us that we should be called children of God, and that is what we are. Can I get an amen? This is Hello, My Name Is. Hello, my name is regret. I'm pretty sure we have met. Every single day of your life, I'm the whisper inside that won't let you forget. Hello, my name is defeat. I know you recognize me. Just when you think you can win, I'll drag you right back down again until you've lost all belief. Amen.
Hello, brothers and sisters in the fight for life. It is such an honor to be part of this global human rights movement with you, the greatest global human rights movement in history. Together, we are standing up against the greatest injustice that our world has ever seen. In the past 4 decades, over 1.5 billion children have been killed worldwide by the violence of abortion. In our nation alone, since 1973, in the last 48 years, over 62 million boys and girls, sons and daughters have been killed. We remember them. We will never forget them. And we will fight to secure a future where every child is safe. There is hope. There are people who are leaving the abortion industry. There are mothers and fathers who are rejecting the abortions of their past and standing up to speak out and advocate for children of the future. In the last year, during COVID shutdowns and with the birth of my now 1-year-old son, I spent time thinking and praying as I wrote my book, Fighting for Life. I thought about the last 15 years of my activism, working with many of you, working with Live Action, and I came to this conclusion. Our politics will not change until our people change. Politics have been incredibly disappointing. The law is horribly unjust. And yet our political breakthroughs, our political successes will only be short-term unless they are rooted in deep cultural breakthroughs. And this is actually the hope. It is the hope because that cultural breakthrough is possible if we do the quiet and sometimes difficult daily work of service, education, and prayer. And it's happening. Many of you are working day in and day out in your communities, serving women and families in need, serving children through foster care, adoption, and pregnancy resource centers. Many of you are on the sidewalks of abortion clinics, praying and advocating and witnessing. Many of you are educating about sexuality, the dignity of the human person, and the atrocity of abortion. Many of you are fighting for family, for mothers and fathers to come together in marriage, to serve each other and love each other and their children. If we do this work together, we can transform our culture and we can ultimately sustain the laws that protect our children. Thank you for fighting. Thank you for standing with me. Never give up. Keep the vision in your heart and in your mind, the vision of what we are fighting for. A nation that embraces every single life, that sees every human being as made in God's image and likeness, holy and sacred. God bless you all.
Did I ever think that this case would last 28 years and go before the U.S. Supreme Court not only once, not only twice, but 3 times? And to be so important in the history of protest in America? Inconceivable.
Special thanks to Jeannie Mancini and the entire March for Life team, and thanks to all of you for virtually attending the 2021 March for Life. I and all pro-life members of Congress know that whether in person or virtual, we are together strong. Life unites. Just like today, both Presidents Clinton and Obama came into office with Democratic majorities in both houses and sweeping plans to eviscerate all pro-life laws and policies. And there were significant pro-life setbacks, but you and I absolutely refuse to quit or to go away. Today, we again face enormous challenges and recommit to persevere through prayer, fasting, and good works, and respect, including for those with whom we fundamentally disagree, even when it's not reciprocated. President Biden, in your inaugural speech, you claim that, quote, the dream of justice for all will be deferred no longer. You spoke of a, quote, cry for survival from the planet itself, a cry that can't be any more desperate. Mr. President, the dream of justice for all cannot be achieved if a whole segment of society is legally ignored and discriminated against and disenfranchised against because of where they live in their mother's wombs and how small and defenseless they are. We know you understand this. You get it. Or at least you once did. Years ago, you wrote a constituent explaining that a law against funding for abortion would, quote, protect both the woman and her unborn child. The science of human development has not changed, and thanks to ultrasound, the unborn babies are more visible than ever before. Mr. President, growing numbers of Americans are shocked to learn that the methods of abortion include dismemberment of a child's fragile body, including decapitation, and that drugs like RU-46 starve the baby to death before he or she is forcibly expelled from the womb. The multi-billion-dollar abortion industry cleverly markets the sophistry of choice while going to extraordinary lengths to ignore, trivialize, and cover up the battered baby victim. Abortion violence, Mr. President, must be replaced with compassion and empathy for women and for defenseless unborn babies in the United States and around the world. We must love them both. More than 62 million babies have been killed by abortion in the United States since Roe versus Wade, a loss of children's lives that equates with the entire population of Italy. Someday, future generations of Americans will look back on us and wonder how and why a society that prided itself on human rights and empathy could have effectuated and enabled the loss of so many defenseless babies. Mr. President, reversing the Protecting Life and Global Health Assistance, also known as the Mexico City policy, forces U.S. taxpayers now to fund organizations that promote, lobby for, or perform abortion on demand in foreign countries. Yet Americans overwhelmingly oppose using U.S. foreign aid to subsidize abortion. The Marist poll last year found that, quote, more than 3 in 4 Americans, 76%, oppose using tax dollars to support abortions in other countries. Lives, as you surely know, are saved by the Hyde Amendment, a domestic policy ban on funding for abortion you once supported. More than 20 peer-reviewed studies show that more than 2 million people are alive today in the United States because of the Hyde Amendment, with about 60,000 children spared death by abortion every year. Over 2 million people who would have been aborted instead survived because public funds were unavailable to effectuate their violent demise, and their mothers instead benefited from maternal and prenatal health care and support. By reason of their age, dependency, immaturity, inconvenience, or unwantedness, unborn babies have been denied justice and legally rendered persona non grata. Yet the cries for survival couldn't be any more desperate. These children need the President of the United States to be their friend and advocate, not another powerful adversary. In your words, that the dream of justice for all will be deferred no longer, are to have any true meaning, the lives of unborn children must be included, and their precious lives must be protected. Justice demands it.
Hello, world. Do you see me? Though hidden, I am here, waiting for the rest of my life to unfold. Soon I will arrive. Or will I? It's really not up to me. Be my champion in the fight for my life.
Hello, everybody. I'm Jim Daly, president of Focus on the Family. Like everyone else, I wish so much that we could be together in person. Now, I've had the privilege of speaking before lots of groups, but there is something wonderfully unique and powerful about the March for Life. Yes, it's always a big crowd, but more importantly, it's an even bigger cause. And that's because there is no greater injustice today than the injustice being perpetrated on innocent preborn life. The years roll on and the numbers grow higher and higher. In fact, I'm afraid many in our culture have grown numb to the growing toll. Since 1973, more than 60 million babies have been lost to abortion. To the world, they're a number, but to God, they each have a name. Children who would grow up to achieve great things. People who would have grown up and discovered cures to deadly diseases, invented and pioneered new technologies, helped lead our nation and improved neighborhoods, loved others, and made the world a richer and happier place. The writer John Greenleaf Whittier said it best, "For all sad words of tongue and pen, the saddest are these, it might have been." Many years ago, the late President Ronald Reagan observed, "I've noticed that everyone who is for abortion has already been born." And that is so true. Some time ago, I was being interviewed on television, and I was pitted against a woman who believes strongly in the right to abortion. She was making her case for choice and tossed out all kinds of typical talking points that were untrue. And when it came my turn to respond, I simply said, "I'm so glad your mother chose life for you." And she was flustered and didn't know what to say. And that's because life is always the better choice. I was recently at a coffee shop and noticed all the workers had pictures of themselves with their pets taped to the window. Now, I love dogs, and I think it's great that so many people love animals and work to protect them. But I wondered if many of those same people would spend as much energy and emotion protecting human life. Thankfully, Jeannie Mancini and the March for Life team happily spend every last ounce of energy on behalf of the preborn and the women they fight for. We're so grateful for them, and they're making a wonderful difference. Life is winning. And here at Focus on the Family, it's a privilege to partner with the March for Life, along with pregnancy resource centers around the country. For over 15 years now, we've been placing ultrasound machines in clinics and high abortion areas. And we know that when an abortion-minded woman sees an ultrasound of her baby, she is much more likely to carry that baby to term. And this ministry has helped save almost 500,000 precious babies. And we need to support and pray for abortion-minded women and help them on their journey through their pregnancy and well beyond. We need to work to make life so attractive that people will one day look back and see the era of Roe as something like a chilling chapter out of the dark ages. And as the Apostle Paul urged us, let us not become weary in doing good, for at the proper time we will reap a harvest if we do not give up. God bless you all.
Hi everyone, my name is Matthew West. I'm a contemporary Christian recording artist and songwriter. I'm actually here at the Museum of the Bible, and I've loved every chance that I've had to come and visit this incredible place. I actually got to visit the museum when the foundation was being poured. I had a hard hat on, and I got to see the beginnings of what this has now become. It is an incredible place, and it needs to be a stop that you put on your bucket list. I just can't encourage you enough. When you're on your way to D.C., you got to make the Museum of the Bible a stop and prepare to spend several hours, because it's just an incredible experience. So come and see us at the Museum of the Bible. You don't want to miss it.
Hey, this next song's for anybody who's ever felt like they've messed up one too many times. The lyrics in the chorus say there's a war between guilt and grace, and they're fighting for a sacred place. But I'm living proof that grace wins every time. My prayer for all of us is that we will be carriers of that message of grace, and we will speak grace and mercy over those who feel like they're too far gone, letting them know there's no such thing when it comes to how God sees us.
In my weakest moment, I see you shaking your head in disgrace. I can read the disappointment. It's written all over your face. Here come those whispers in my ear, telling me, who do you think you are? Looks like you're on your own from here. Grace could never reach that far.
I believe that life begins at conception. I believe that God knew us before He formed us in the womb. These beliefs are an important part of my Christian faith, which guides my votes in the Kentucky legislature to protect unborn life. I'm proud that my state is a national leader in legislation that protects the unborn. I'm also a Democrat, and I serve in my party's leadership as House Minority Whip. I was glad to be asked to speak today because I believe in this year's theme, Together Strong, Life Unites. I believe we need a bipartisan effort to end abortion, but not just by outlawing it, but also by eliminating the reasons women seek abortions in the first place. When we make access to health care so difficult that only the wealthy get to be healthy, when we don't pay working mothers a living wage, and when we don't support families struggling with affordable child care and preschool, when we don't adequately fund foster care and adoption services and social services, we drive up the number of women who feel that they have no choice but to seek an abortion. I believe we should all be pro-life for the whole life. So in the same way that I've found the political courage to speak the pro-life message as a Democrat, I'm asking pro-life Republican legislators to find the courage to support not only anti-abortion legislation, but also pro-babies and moms legislation. Nationwide, a third of Democrats are pro-life, which amounts to about 21 million of us. If you're one of those, consider joining Democrats for Life organization at democratsforlife.org. The pro-life movement has had some success in recent decades, but our work is far from over. I want a Kentucky and a country where no woman feels she has no choice but abortion, where everyone has a chance for a happy and healthy life from the moment we're conceived until the Lord calls us home. That's what pro-life means to me. I'm proud to take part in this year's March for Life rally and to continue striving to live and legislate, believing that regardless of political affiliation, together we are strong and that life unites us. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Kristen Wagner with Alliance Defending Freedom. For over 25 years, ADF has defended unborn babies, their moms, and pro-life advocates in court. We've represented pregnancy centers, sidewalk counselors, pro-life students, and even the March for Life. We fully believe in this year's March for Life theme, Together Strong, Life Unites. ADF couldn't do this vital work without your support. Thank you for standing up and speaking out for those who can't yet stand or speak up for themselves.
Hello, this is Benjamin and Kirsten Watson. Though we're separated on this day, confined to our individual dwelling places and locations, we're together in spirit, resolve, and commitment to protect the lives of preborn children, not only in America, but around the globe. But although we are physically distanced, let this time be a reminder that the most important work to build a culture of life does not depend on us gathering. On the contrary, it begins in our homes, overflows to our places of worship and employment, and influences our local communities, which then impacts our nation.
This collective desire to protect the dignity of life requires us to do justice. Our righteous, life-giving deeds must boldly address the most pressing needs of the women, men, and children in crisis. We must operate in kindness and mercy, understanding that death and life rest in the power of the tongue, and we must engage with humility, seeking God's wisdom and favor for the days ahead.
Never forget that the foundation of this justice movement is the Imago Dei. We believe that every man, woman, and child bears the image of their Creator. This truth endows all of us with inherent value and dignity from conception to the grave. This truth compels us to contend with those seeking to devalue and exterminate life for their own profit or purposes. This truth empowers us to stay the course regardless of Supreme Court rulings, political turnover, internal exhaustion, debilitating fear, or the shadow of doubt. This truth confirms the fact that this labor is not, was not, and never will be in vain.
Unity is being quick to listen, slow to anger, and even slower to label. Make no mistake about it, this time is one of great conflict, division, anger, and pain. But this time is also one of great opportunity, not only to renew the vision, but to strengthen our existing bonds and expand our partnerships. This is the time to push forward, creating the diverse coalition of life-affirming people and groups whose influence, intellect, and ingenuity can be developed to usher in a time of true justice for all.
As parents, it's imperative that we intentionally teach our children about the value of human life, not only with our words, but with our deeds. Let hospitality, generosity, and respect flow from our households so that the lives we are charged with leading, our children, will understand that life matters, even life that is from the other side of the tracks. We will do this imperfectly, but we cannot expect our kids to be something we are not striving to become. Every day, we are planting seeds that will one day bear fruit. Parents, continue to teach them to engage the culture in conviction without compromise.
But remember, the way in which you engage matters. The book of Proverbs speaks to us women directly by declaring strength and dignity are her clothing, and she smiles at the future. She opens her mouth in wisdom, and the teaching of kindness is on her tongue.
And young men, older men, fathers, sons, it challenges us not to believe the lie that this is not your issue, but instead it says, speak up for those who cannot speak for themselves. Speak for the rights of all who are destitute. Speak up and judge fairly. Defend the rights of the poor and the needy.
Life unites because the very breath we breathe is not our own.
And it takes each one of our lives together to end the unthinkable practice of abortion in the United States of America. God bless you.
You and I are fighting for children whose rights are being taken away because they're really, really small, really, really young, and live inside their moms. Convince your friends that loving life and protecting human life is one of the most important things they can do. Be absolutely fearless as you stand for life.
Hi there. I'm Congresswoman Kat Cammack, proudly representing Florida's 3rd Congressional District, the Gator Nation.
I'm so sorry that we aren't able to celebrate in our nation's capital today as one, but I'm proud to join you virtually as we celebrate life. As the youngest Republican woman elected in Congress, my pro-life story is a personal one that has affected my entire life and has made me who I am today. Before I was born, my mother suffered a devastating stroke just before giving birth to my sister. Doctors told her then that future pregnancies would be extremely high risk. Years later, when she was pregnant with me, against the urging of her doctors and even family, she did something incredible. She chose life. Her bravery and courage in the face of this difficult decision led to my passion for standing up for the rights of the innocent and the unborn. Life is sacred. The rights of unborn children are sacred, and this movement to support the right to life is a critical one. I vow to stand up for the millions of innocent lives across this country, and I'm proud to stand beside this movement's passionate and dedicated advocates. Your integrity in choosing to stand up for this population is often unpopular with your peers, your friends, and even your neighbors sometimes. But never lose faith. Advocates like you who don't sit by when the rights of millions are infringed are critical to ensuring that we protect lives for years to come. Thank you for your passion. Thank you for your conviction to do what's right. And thank you for allowing me to speak with you today. I hope to join you next year in person in our nation's capital as we celebrate our most precious and vulnerable and life. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Elizabeth Eller, and I am the student body president at Christendom College. I'm honored to be here today representing all young people as we stand for the unchanging truth that life begins in the womb. While sidewalk counseling with my fellow students at Christendom College, I've experienced firsthand how young women just like me are lied to and abused by the abortion industry. Since coming to understand how evil abortion is, I have seen it as my responsibility as an American and as a Catholic to speak out for the hundreds of thousands of boys and girls who are murdered every year in America. Women deserve better than abortion, and so do their babies. To my fellow young people, a third of our generation is missing because they were not deemed worthy of their very own lives. With this in mind, I implore you, do everything you can to give a voice to those who don't have their own. In the words of Pope Benedict XVI, you were not made for comfort. You were made for greatness. Let's continue to be uncomfortable. Let's speak out for the most vulnerable among us each and every day. We can and will be the generation that sees the end of abortion if we take responsibility and defend the unborn. Millions of lives depend on our actions. As Esther 4:14 says, perhaps this is the moment for which you have been created. We have been created to be the voice of truth in this society of lies. United for life, we are strong, and each step we take together gets us closer to the end of abortion in America. Thank you for your efforts today and every day. May God bless you, and may God bless America.
Pro-Life is a ministry that I founded to primarily fill gaps in the pro-life movement. One of the things that was said to me by my boss when I left Planned Parenthood is that I had made an enemy of one of the most powerful organizations on the planet. But that's such a lie, because the most powerful organization on the planet is the church. You can be the deciding factor between life and death.
Hey March for Life, and thanks again for joining us today for the largest human rights demonstration in the world.
Today, hundreds of thousands of pro-life advocates are joining together virtually to celebrate the gift of life and give witness to the greatest human rights abuse of our time, abortion.
Today is the day that all pro-life Americans come together and say no more to the violence of abortion, and we march for life.
But we must continue marching for life, tomorrow and the next day, and every day until we bring an end to abortion.
So we're calling on you to march on with us.
So pull out your phones right now and text MARCH to 73075.
And in the 30 seconds that it takes you to text MARCH to 73075, you are making the pledge to march for life throughout the year. Not only will we keep you up to date on important pro-life issues as they happen, but we will also connect you directly to your lawmakers so that you can use your voice as a pro-life American.
So text in and let's end abortion.
I worked at Planned Parenthood for 8 years. I left after being sold on this idea that abortion was helping women. And so I started and then there were none. And it was like just a storm of people contacting us and wanting to leave. And so we're trying to pick them out one by one until there are none. This is where we need you to help us truly change lives for the kingdom.
Aloha. I hope you and your families are all safe and well. Now, for those of you that have been to Hawaii, or even if you haven't, many of you know usually the first word that you hear when you get off the plane is aloha. It's also probably the last word that you'll hear when you leave. In fact, many people mistakenly think that aloha simply means hello and goodbye. Actually, the word aloha means something much deeper. It means love, compassion, and caring for each other. And yes, that means loving and caring for each other from the conception of life in the womb to one's natural death. One of the best commentaries on the meaning of aloha is by Queen Liliuokalani, the last sovereign monarch of the Hawaiian kingdom. And I'd like to share that with you now. Quote, "And wherever the native Hawaiian went, he said aloha in meeting or in parting. Aloha was a recognition of life in another. If there was life, there was mana, goodness, and wisdom. And if there was goodness and wisdom, there was a God quality. One had to recognize the God of life in another before saying aloha. But this was easy. Life was everywhere, in the trees, the flowers, the ocean, the fish, the birds, the pili grass, the rainbow, the rock. In all the world was life, was God, was aloha. Aloha in its gaiety, joy, happiness, abundance. Because of aloha, one gave without thought of return. Because of aloha, one had mana. Aloha had its own mana. It never left the giver, but flowed freely and continuously between giver and receiver. Aloha could not be thoughtlessly or indiscriminately spoken, for it carried its own power. No Hawaiian could greet another with aloha unless he felt it in his own heart. If he felt anger or hate in his heart, he had to cleanse himself before he said aloha," unquote. In the Hawaiian culture, mana is a spiritual energy and healing power. It can manifest in places, objects, and people. It can be gained or lost by one's actions. So in keeping with this year's theme, Together Strong, Life Unites, in the spirit of aloha, let us recognize the mana, the goodness and wisdom, the God quality in each of us. Let us truly recognize the God of life in one another. As 2021 unfolds, we don't know what's in store. None of us knows how the new normal will continue to unfold. But what we do know is that we are on a lifelong mission together, and that it's our personal responsibility, our kuleana, to do our best at each and every moment to preserve life. And that means doing it with aloha, love, and compassion. Mahalo for inviting me to share with you today. Ke akua, me ke aloha. God bless you.
The number one social issue facing this nation today is how this nation will treat the unborn. The greatest thing about this country is not about where you start. It's about where you begin.
The real battle
for Life in America happens at pregnancy centers. It happens eye to eye with a mother as you counsel her, work her through her pregnancy to make sure that not only does that life come into the world, but that that mother and that child has what they need to be successful.
We provide those services for free. Social services, caring services, medical services, counseling services. We're in a battle for life, and life wins.
We can be for life, and we can restore the sanctity of life back to the center of American law, and I believe with all of my heart, in our lifetime we will.
That's the real work that's happening across this country. Life will continue to win.
Hi, my name is J.D. Greer, and I am the president of the Southern Baptist Convention and pastor of the Summit Church in Raleigh, North Carolina. Why do I march? Well, let me attempt to explain that through a story. A few years ago, our church stopped, as we do each year, on Sanctity of Life Sunday to lament the tragic loss of life in abortion and to make clear its injustice, to pray that God would deliver our nation speedily from this scourge, and to offer the grace of Jesus Christ to those who've gone through it and offer ourselves as a help and a resource to women in the midst of difficulty. Well, unbeknownst to me that day, in our congregation was a college student who had just learned that she was pregnant and was scheduled to have an abortion that afternoon. My words that day, she said, convinced her to cancel the appointment, to choose life for her baby and put that baby out for adoption. The first that I learned of this story was when the family who adopted this precious little girl walked in with her and told me that God had used me that morning, used the fact that I said something to save the life of their daughter. And as I got to hold that little girl that day, I knew that life was worth it, because we're not talking about a political reality. We're talking about individuals. So why do I march? I march because actual lives are at stake. I march because our words matter. And the famous words of Edmund Burke, the only thing necessary for evil to triumph is for good people to do nothing. Simply speaking the truth that Sunday led to a life, an individual life of somebody made in the image of God being saved. Do you want to protect the innocent? Do you want to defend the vulnerable? Are you committed to social justice? Do you want to fight systemic injustice? Well, there are a few places where dire urgency meets such moral clarity and such clear opportunity as in the cause of the protection of children in the womb. Speak up, Scripture says. Speak up for the voiceless. Defend the cause of the poor and the needy. Abortion is the greatest moral tragedy of our day. So maybe you're listening in today and you've had an abortion, or you're considering it. If you look to Him, you're not going to find an angry judge pointing a finger at you to condemn you. You're going to find a compassionate Savior with open arms ready to receive you. And we're here too. We don't condemn you either, because Jesus didn't. He didn't run away from us and our mistakes, so we're not going to run away from you and yours. But join us is our invitation in a culture that values and protects life, particularly that of the most vulnerable. Choose justice, choose compassion, choose life.
The domain of a university is universal knowledge about how men and women are meant to live as human beings, how they're meant to be contributors to society, contributors to the culture. And our work at the University of Mary is to help our students to be able to see that each of them have that possibility to live fully, to live well, so that they're not just existing, but they're really living. That they're not just surviving, but they're thriving. University of Mary, for life.
Thank you, JD. We have only one speaker left before we begin our small March for Life led by pro-life leaders. Before we wrap up, we're going to hear from two-time national champion, Heisman Trophy winner, author, baseball player, and leader of an anti-human trafficking foundation, Tim Tebow.
And although Tim is joining us briefly right now for the rally, I'd also like to invite you to tune back in this evening for our virtual Rose Dinner, where you'll be able to hear my in-depth interview with Tim as our keynote speaker. You can still register for the Rose Dinner on our website at marchforlife.org. We're so grateful to Tim for his witness on this issue and are excited to hear from him. Tim, welcome to the March for Life.
In 1986, a missionary preaching in a remote village in the Philippines, before he went on stage, God pricked his heart, and God started to put on his heart all of the babies around the world that were being aborted. And he began to weep uncontrollably. And God put on his heart and his head that night that even though he already had 4 kids, that he needed to have another one. He needed to have a 5th. And he needed to make him a preacher. So he went on stage and he preached that night. And afterwards, he made the long voyage home to his wife and his 4 kids. And he told his wife, honey, I really feel like God put on my heart that we need to have another baby. And his wife's like, listen, God didn't put that on my heart. But a few days later, God put it on his wife's heart as well. And so the missionary and his wife and their entire family, all 4 kids, started to pray that she would get pregnant and that they could have another baby. A little while later, she got pregnant. But the pregnancy was not easy. It was really hard and it was really difficult. Actually, in fact, they didn't even believe that she was pregnant at first. They actually thought it was a tumor, a mass of fetal tissue. But then they realized that she was pregnant and she did have a baby in her womb. But all the doctors said, you need to have an abortion. You need to get rid of him. You need to get rid of him. But she decided that she was going to trust God. Even when the doctor said it could and might cost her her life, she decided she was going to trust God. And the pregnancy was so tough. There were so many setbacks and heartaches, but the whole time she continued to trust God. And then it came time to give birth. And a doctor who had been doing it over 35 years, and this was his specialty, helping women give birth, and he helped deliver that baby. And in over 35 years of doing it, he looked at her and said, of all my years, this is the greatest miracle that I have ever seen, because I have no idea how he survived. The placenta is not attached, and there's so many different issues, and I don't know how he had the nourishment and the food to be able to survive. This is a miracle baby. Here is your baby, Mrs. Tebow. And that day I got to meet my mom. And I'm so grateful that my mom gave me a chance at life. Because many times could she have made the choice to do something different. But because of her pro-life story, I now get to share my story. But it's only because my mom gave me a chance. And I'm so grateful that every single one of you are here today, that you have made the choice to choose life, that it matters to you. Because I do believe every single life matters to God. You know who else I believe stood and stands for life? Is our Savior Jesus. You know, he said in John, I came to give life and give life abundantly. See, he had a mission. That mission was a rescue mission for us. That mission was to come down to this earth and go to the cross and defeat death and overcome the world. That was his mission. See, but he also had a motivation. Hebrews 12:2 tells us, fixing our eyes on Jesus, the author and perfecter of faith, who for the joy set before him endured the cross, despised the shame, and sat down at the right hand of the throne of God. What was his motivation? It tells us right there, for the joy set before him. When Jesus was going to the cross, what was the joy set before him. It was you. It was me. It was us being made right with his dad. It was us having life and life abundantly and eternal life in heaven. That was the joy set before him. See, he had a mission and he accomplished it. He had a motivation. It's why he could endure. It's why he could despise the shame. It's why he could go to the cross. Because he loved you and me so much. He had a motivation. You know, guys, we throw out words like hyped and motivation and even passion. And so many times in my life, people have even watched the way I've played games and said, oh, you're very motivated, you're very passionate. But do we really understand what these words mean, especially passion? You see, passion is a 12th century Latin word that actually means to suffer. And where it comes from is because when they were talking about the passion of the Christ. You see, he cared so much for us. He was willing to go to the cross, even though he was going to suffer. You see, when you're passionate about something, you're going to do it anyways, even if you're going to suffer. What are you really passionate about? You see, Jesus was passionate about you, and he was passionate about me. You know, I've given so much of my life for sports. And people might say, I was passionate about that. But that's for trophies that rust and for praise of people that are going to forget your name. Does that really matter? I don't think so. But you see, being passionate about Jesus and passionate about life and passionate about people and passionate about those that have been thrown away and neglected and forgotten, that is worthy, that is meaningful, that is real significance. Do you have real passion for what really matters? Do you care so much that you would be willing to suffer? You see, it's also where we get the word compassion. You see, passion is you care so much for a cause, you'd be willing to suffer for it. Compassion is you care so much for a people or a person that you're willing to suffer with them. Let me ask you a question. Are you willing to suffer for and are you willing to suffer with? Jesus did that for us. Are we willing to do that for humanity? But not just for the unborn, but for all of life. You see, when you're pro-life, I believe that we're called to be pro-life in every area. For the unborn, for the hurting, for the orphan, for the thrown away, for the special needs, for the trafficked, for all of humanity. You see, I believe we got to do a better job of always being pro-life all the time, everywhere, no matter what. You see, Jesus went on a rescue mission to give us life and life abundantly. We need to live on a rescue mission of truly loving people well. You see, that reminds me of 1 Corinthians 13, because when we talk about love, everybody likes to throw 1 Corinthians chapter 13. And 9 times Paul mentions love in 1 Corinthians chapter 13. 9 times. But every single one of those loves, in the Greek, it's the word agape. Because in the Greek, there are 4 types of love, but the most admirable was agape because it was God's love for us. And the best definition I've ever heard of that is to choose the best interest of another person and act on their behalf. It's exactly what Jesus did for us, and it's what we're called to do for other people, to choose their best interests and act on their behalf. One of my favorite verses in that chapter is verse number 7. It said, love bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things, endures all things. The same word endure we just read in Hebrews. It's now here in 1 Corinthians chapter 13. Same word, hupomeno. You see, the love Jesus had for us, he endured. He endured. Paul is saying, when we love people, we're going to be willing to endure, to remain under, to remain in. It actually gives the visual of a soldier that is not going to give ground, but he's going to stand firm. See, Jesus stood firm for us, defeated death and overcame the world. I'm going to ask you to stand firm, to love people, to bear all things, believe all things, hope all things, endure all things. That's what we're called to do for people, because that's what real love looks like. That's what Jesus did for us. That's what we're supposed to do for people. We're supposed to endure all things for them. Stay in that fight. Guys, I believe that this fight is a hard fight, and it might even get harder. But I'm going to ask you and challenge you to stay in it. That doesn't mean we're going to be perfect, and we're not going to have bad days, and we're not going to lose heart at times. But we can choose the best interest of other people, and we can act on their behalf. And just like Jesus chose our best interest, and he endured the cross, despised the shame, finished his mission, and sat down at the right hand of the throne of God, we can endure whatever hardships we face because people, because humanity, because loving people is worth it. So I want to thank you for being here today. I want to thank you for loving people and loving them well. And I want to ask you and I want to challenge you to remain in the fight, to endure, to love people well, all people, no matter what background, no matter what religion, no matter what color, no matter what has happened in them, to them, or through them. We are called to love people. See, Jesus came on a rescue mission for us. We need to be on a rescue mission for them. Thank you so much, and God bless.
(1974), the year we first started. At the footsteps of the Capitol, united we stood.
Hand in hand, we marched together for the freedom of those who could not.
And although much has changed throughout the years, our mission and our hearts remain the same.
January after January, we come together for the same cause.
To protect all life.
Through snowstorms, miles of travel,
pro-life and pro-abortion presidents.
Against many odds, we always march on.
This year is no different.
In fact, now more than ever, we need to lean on each other.
And unite in our mission.
But the March for Life doesn't begin or end in D.C.
It starts in our everyday, ordinary lives.
Through our actions, ways of loving,
and way of truly living out the pro-life message
in all facets of our lives.
We always march on.
Not alone, but together.
So whether we are marching in Washington or our state capitals or our neighborhoods or in our daily actions, we are together.
We are strong.
Because life unites.
As we come to the end of our virtual rally, I want to thank all of you for being with us today, united in the cause for life. Normally at this time, I'd be joined on stage by dozens of pro-life organizations with whom we're blessed to work with throughout the year. On your screen now are the names of some of those organizations. Together, we work year-round to help build a culture of life and a nation where abortion becomes unthinkable. From the bottom of my heart, I want to thank each of these friends and allies who prove that we are stronger together, united together for the cause of life. In a moment, I will be joining a small group of leaders representing many of these such organizations on our annual march to the Supreme Court. Together, we will represent you, the millions of pro-life Americans working every day in the name of the tens of millions of Americans that we've lost to abortion. The annual March for Life in Washington, D.C. is a powerful and a unitive demonstration for life. But our work to end abortion does not stop there. Recognizing how transformative the experience of attending the March for Life is for so many, we have begun to bring state marches to state capitals across the country. As hostility towards life in Washington increases, these state-by-state efforts become even more vital for the success of our cause to end abortion. I can't emphasize how important the grassroots activism at these state levels is. And I invite you today to join us in these efforts by giving your support to the March for Life. Your gift of support today will help fund not only the next National March for Life in January of 2022, but also these state marches. To give, please click on the donate button below or go to marchforlife.org/donate. Thank you for your generosity. And now here to close us out in prayer is the lovely Sissy Graham Lynch. Sissy is the daughter of Franklin Graham and the granddaughter of the late Reverend Billy Graham. She works as part of the Billy Graham Evangelistic Association and Samaritan's Purse in various capacities. She also hosts the podcast Fearless with Sissy Graham Lynch. Sissy, we're so happy to have you today, and I'm going to be leaving now and joining our other pro-life leaders as we march to the Supreme Court.
Last year, I attended the March for Life for the very first time, and I left encouraged and forever changed because I saw a generation being led with grace and with truth and with a passion to see a heart of a nation change. Will you join me in prayer? God, we come to you today, and we praise you. We thank you, God, for blessing this nation beyond our imagination, far greater than we deserve. And Lord, I thank you for March for Life and all those who have worked tirelessly on the front lines to advocate for every life and that every life has value. Lord, I also thank you for every individual that has worked in a crisis pregnancy center or come along young mothers and young fathers to know that they are loved, that they are cherished, there's purpose in their life, and that there is hope. Lord, I pray for the church, that we would be united with love, we would be united with truth to face this issue, because this issue breaks your heart. And I pray that as a church, our heart will be broken by the things that break your heart. Lord, I pray for the current administration and those who are working on policy, that their hearts would be softened, God, for them to know that you've created life, that every life is valued and a miracle, Lord. Lord, and I thank you that Scripture says that you are a God that sees us, that you're a God that's with us. And Lord, that you do see. You see those young mothers, you see the young fathers that feel hopeless right now. But Lord, I pray that your mighty touch and your love would embrace them, that they would know that there's hope in you, that you would put somebody in their life for them to know that you love them and that you have purpose for their life and you have purpose for their child's life. Lord, I pray for this generation rising up, that they would continue to be a voice for the voiceless, Lord, that you would give them, once again, your grace, your truth to change the heart of a nation. In Jesus' name we pray, amen.
Hey, it's been such an honor to be part of this special event, and I want to sing one final song. This was a song I was asked to write for a movie that was inspired by the story of my friend Abby Johnson. And the movie's called Unplanned. I was struck by her story in a powerful way and was inspired to write these words after reading the script. I hope as you listen to this song that our conviction will be strengthened and we will be reminded that as long as our God holds the world in his hands, there's no such thing as unplanned. I hope this song speaks to your heart. Thanks for letting me be part of this special event.
I'm looking at a masterpiece. I'm staring at a work of art. I'm listening to a symphony in every beat of your tiny heart. You used to be a choice to make. Now I think you've chosen me. 'Cause I see 10 fingers, 10 toes, 2 eyes, and I know this is meant to be. Oh, I don't believe in accidents. Miracles, they don't just happen by chance. As long as my God holds the world in his hands, I know that there's no such thing as unplanned. Symphony in every beat of your tiny heart.
Thank y'all so much for letting me be with you today. Keep up the good work.
And welcome back to EWTN's complete televised coverage of the 48th annual March for Life. I'm Tracy Sable, lead anchor for EWTN News Nightly. And that was the virtual rally for the March for Life. It was incredible. It is a unique year for the march and the pro-life movement with the combination of the coronavirus pandemic and recent security threats in our nation's capital. The March for Life opted to be virtual this year. And now following that virtual rally, a select group of pro-life leaders will process through the streets of D.C. in solemn remembrance of the 1973 Roe versus Wade anniversary. And as you can see right there, they are marching right now in Washington, D.C. And one of those pro-life leaders picked to represent the pro-life movement is our own Catherine Hadro, host and managing editor for EWTN Pro-Life Weekly. She will be bringing us inside access into the March for Life with fellow pro-life leaders, and she joins us now with a pro-life interview. Catherine.
Hi, Tracy. Well, yes, as you can see, the march has officially just began. Everyone here is holding a rose, and I am joined now by the president of the March for Life, Jeannie Mancini. Jeannie, hello, we are here. It's the day of the March for Life. Hello. Tell us what's going through your mind as we begin this march.
Well, it's very different than any march we've had in the past, but it seems appropriate. We're at such a crossroads culturally right now, and I think this march will be a lot more somber. People are very quiet, very prayerful. I think we're all considering where our culture is, where this new administration is, and praying to bring in a culture of life.
Yeah, absolutely. And as I mentioned, we're all carrying a rose here. Tell us the significance of that.
Yes, so the rose is our logo, our March for Life logo. If you look on our masks, you'll see a rose there. From its earliest days, the rose was delivered to both pro-abortion and pro-life politicians at the end of the march at the Capitol. After 9/11, we weren't able to actually deliver them in person, but we thought that today it would be great to get back to the basics and to the most symbolic, part of this. Of course, a rose is also symbolic of life. The red is symbolic of the blood that's been lost, the bloodshed. And of course, in our culture, we are in a culture of walking wounded. We've lost over 62 million Americans to abortion since it was legalized in 1973. So there is such a grievous, somber experience here as we're praying.
Absolutely, and you can feel that, like you said, it's much quieter. We're used to that loud, joyful, cheering crowds. It's much quieter now. And the theme that you chose is Together Strong, Life Unites. Why is that so important right now?
So we choose a different theme every year. We really try to pray and discern about what can really serve as a springboard for the most cutting-edge culture of life issues. So past themes have included things like adoption, a noble decision, or pro-life is pro-science. This year, we just sensed that we needed to talk about unity and the importance of diversity creating unity. So unity, of course, isn't sameness. It's recognizing that we each have a unique gift that we bring to the table, and that when we lock arms, we're so much stronger together.
Wow, no, that's so beautiful. And like you said, I feel like we need this message now more than ever. Wow, Jeannie, is there any other message you'd like to share with our viewers who are watching right now?
Well, mostly I just want to say that even though there are just a few of us marching here today, that we're all symbolically marching and we're in solidarity with each other. And the march is one day, but it's really about building a culture of life all year round. So please know that we're together in solidarity, and please pray fast for a culture of life, especially at this unique moment in our country's history.
Jeannie Mancini, thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.
Back to you, Tracy.
Okay, thank you so much, Catherine. Wonderful interview. All right, I'm joined now in the studio with Star Parker, president and founder of Center for Urban Renewal and Education. Star, thanks so much for joining us. We appreciate it.
You're welcome. You're welcome. And because you were first on my calendar, I was not out there with them walking through the streets of Washington, D.C. as one of the national leaders who find this a very special time for us to unify ourselves as the body of Christ, having those few represent all of those that are home right now, thinking about us, praying with us, and wish that they were here. And especially with the weather this time.
I know.
It wasn't even blizzard. They were like, oh man, one time we got caught in the snow. This would have been a perfect time to come. But I just commend the leaders of the March for Life to think about the hour and to think about those that were questioning whether we should gather, the tensions that were here in Washington. We all know them. We've experienced them. To see our Capitol with barbed wire around it and armed guards, even as we're speaking right now, this is a good time for us to have a quieter march with the leaders. Kind of reminds me of Nehemiah's time, where he was just weeping, and then he went to find those 12 leaders and said, will you help me build?
Yeah. You know, I want to talk about that. You mentioned about the theme for this year. Let's talk a little bit more about that and how that's so important, especially now because our nation is really, unfortunately, so divided. How can we come together on this life issue?
You know, I think that we have had opportunities in our history to gain wisdom and insight, in particular in our American history, during the time of slavery, when you had that big moral question, the same question we're dealing with today, the question of humanity. You know, whose decision is this? And whose humanity is this? And what we're finding is those similarities now are also in the movement. So during the time of slavery, you had various people doing various things. You had the Harriet Tubmans pulling them out one by one, which is like what our pregnancy care centers are doing right now. You had the Elijah Lovejoys, those that have their pen and pencil constantly telling our society it may be legal, but it's not lawful in God's eyes. And then you had those that were working in the legislative arenas in various places, to Frederick Douglasses of the time and many, many others. Even we can say Abraham Lincoln himself trying to sort through. Sword, of course, was much more vocal inside of the apparatus. But these are similarities that we should glean from, and they found ways to work together, and I think that that's what we're experiencing now, because it's a dark moment. Not as if Roe v. Wade, a dark moment to remember in our history, but it's also a dark moment because now we have an administration who is not going to be friendly to the pro-life message at all.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, I want to go back to, you were talking about how this year is different than years past, but the message is still the same. Can we talk about that?
Well, the message is that it may be legal, but it's not lawful to kill what God calls his reward. The message is that, as they were just expressing, and as some of the virtual ministers were expressing, this is life in the womb. There's humanity at stake, not just for what that child may have delivered in their adulthood to the rest of us, but also for that mom and for that dad and for that grandma and for our society. I mean, someone is missing. We're talking numbers of 62 million. They're missing from our society. So yes, the message is the same. It may be legal, but it's not lawful in God's eyes. And we're going to do everything we can in as peaceful of an opportunity as we can to see that this nation comes to its senses and stops this horrible, horrible crime against humanity.
Did anything stick out to you as far as the virtual reality or what we're seeing today? Anything that stuck out most in your mind?
Well, one of the things that stuck out most in my mind is how was I able to sit through the makeup chair and let her put this makeup on while they have me crying, in particular between the songs, because it's just so precious.
I know, we talked about that. Yeah.
You know, this is a moment that we can all say, look, we've touched life. You know, I have two grandchildren. I mean, some people know my story. I was just out of control growing up. I listened to all the lies that we hear in our culture, and I believed them, and my life spiraled out of control. Criminal activity, drug activity, sexual activity that landed me in and out of abortion clinic after clinic. Fast forward that God saved me, cleaned me up. I had a child, and now I have grandchildren. We've touched life. We know what we're doing here. So what we have is a new opportunity to come up out of this march and this time after a season of 2020 to say, Lord, let us put our priorities in place. Let us put our perspectives back in place so that we can remember that this is this is a miracle, which is what one of the songs was singing about.
Absolutely. And you talked about that being, I'm a mom too, having two kids. It does change you. You know. You just know.
We know.
Isn't it?
Yeah. We know. And one of the things that was mentioned, Jenny Mancini mentioned that, you know, adoption has been one of the themes for a time. Mm-hmm. So I think that having the leaders representing each aspect of the movement is really a clever idea, because now we have those that are saying adoption is an option. We can do that. We can save you. We can help you if you decide to keep your child. We can actually minister to the dads. We have everything covered in the pro-life movement. So it is time for us now to bring all those elements together to speak to the whole country and actually to the world. Because one thing we should be incredibly concerned about is that Joe Biden has already gone after those stabilities that were put in place to protect the innocent abroad as well with his, getting rid of Mexico City policy. So we've got a whole lot of work to do. So this is a time to remember that God is still on the throne and he cares about those little ones.
Absolutely. So we're going to talk to you a little bit later too. Can't wait to talk more about that. Right now we're going to head out to our own Catherine Hadro, host and managing editor for EWTN Pro-Life Weekly. She is out in the field. Catherine.
Hi, Tracy. Well, we're continuing to make our way down the D.C. streets, and I will comment, I've been to previous March for Life in the past. This one is very quiet. People are not really talking, but right now I am joined by Bishop Joseph Coffey. He's with the Military Archdiocese, but he is very passionate about the pro-life issue. Tell us about that, Your Excellency.
Well, if you don't mind, I'd like to just first of all thank you for all that you've done for all these years for pro-life. I've been watching EWTN for many, many years, and I watch your program on Sunday mornings, and I thank you for fighting for life.
Well, thank you for your pro-life leadership. I know you're frequently praying outside of Planned Parenthood.
Yes, and as far as this march goes, I first started coming when I was in high school. My father was a founding member of Physicians for Life in Philadelphia, and he told us about the Roe v. Wade decision, my 8 brothers and sisters and me, at the dinner table. That's when I became a pro-lifer.
Wow.
I went to this march when I was in high school, back in the mid-'70s, and then all through college and seminary and as a priest, and I've been going for many, many years. So I've always been considered pro-life, and I to stand up for those who are the voiceless and those who are the sick, the elderly. I mean, we get accused all the time of being just caring about the unborn babies, and that's totally a lie. I think most people know that. We care about all life.
Yes.
And so we march to promote the dignity and the sanctity of all human life. And I've been going outside of Planned Parenthoods for many years also, to pray with the sidewalk counselors, to offer that help that is so readily available. Pro-lifers know that the crisis pregnancy centers outnumber the abortion clinics by a lot. So we're there to offer that help that so many women do need, and they're caught in a situation where they need help, and we're there to give that help.
I didn't realize you got involved at such a young age and being delved into the pro-life movement, and then you became a bishop. How has this commitment to life shaped your pastoral work?
Well, as a priest and as a seminarian, lay people have often said to me that they get inspired by a seminarian or a priest, and certainly a bishop that's out there with them. And I tell them that they inspire us, because we all are in this together, the laity and the clergy, fighting for this incredibly important issue. So I'd like to just use my position as a bishop just to continue spreading a good news of Jesus and the pro-life message. So I try to do that as a seminarian, as a priest, and now as a newly ordained bishop with the Military Archdiocese.
Wow, we only have about a minute left, Your Excellency, but what's your message to our viewers who are watching right now and seeing the events of this day?
Well, I know that pro-lifers all across the country, like me, look forward to this march every year because it gives us a shot in the arm.
Yeah.
And so there's a lot of disappointment, which is understandable, but I would say never despair, never give up, and keep fighting. Fight the good fight, as we need to always remember.
Absolutely. That's so beautiful. That's so well said. And I will say it continues to be really quiet right now. It slowed down, but starting to pick up again here in the streets. I'll send it back to you, Tracy.
Okay, thank you, Catherine. I'm back here with Star Parker. Star, I want to get your take on what we're seeing out there, on the streets in the field right now.
It's beautiful. It's somber. It is different. And we're usually thousands and thousands and thousands. And it is a shot in the arm, as was mentioned by the bishop. And we're a little bit more clear that we have to recognize the moment we're in. I think that that's something we should take away from this time of not being able to come so quickly. Perhaps it's also the Lord opening our eyes to say, well, you know what? Maybe when you take something away from someone, they might appreciate it a little bit more. Had it become just a big party, maybe we should reassess where we are as a movement, and especially now with the Biden administration.
Yeah, let's talk a little bit more about that. What are your concerns when it comes to the Biden administration and kind of what we're up against?
Oh, we're up against evil. And there's no need of us pretending that we're not. We're in a very, very dark moment. And what I've done personally, knowing that this was our new reality, especially working here in Washington, D.C. on these issues, on these poverty issues, race matters, to push out that the answer to poverty is freedom, it's personal responsibility, it's not a welfare state. What they're going to do in terms of life, this is not good. But what I did was just said, you know, I'm going to put my heart in the head of those that went before us in the movement. I mentioned earlier, we saw slavery in our nation. Imagine the disappointment after the Fugitive Slave Act. They had worked hard, and now all of a sudden they have an act that calls people to say, you have a decision to make. And in fact, fascinating story, one of the statues that the left tried to pull down during their movement to then take over the nation's capital was the Lincoln statue. It's an emancipation statue, and it has two people. It has one who's a former slave. He was the last slave caught under the Fugitive Slave Act. The day before he was supposed to return to slavery is when Abraham Lincoln signed the Fugitive Slave Act. Abraham Lincoln signed the emancipation into law. So there's always hope, because he was going to go back into slavery because of the Fugitive Slave Act, and then the emancipation, and it freed him. So we have to remember these moments in history. We have to remember the Dred Scott decision. How did they feel? That was a horrible decision they got down from the court, but they were able to pull themselves back together, the abolitionists and all those who knew that God was on their side because they were on the side of truth.
Yeah, we have probably about a minute left, Star, but I want to ask you, what can we do as pro-lifers?
We pick our hill. The same with Nehemiah. You go to your wall. If you're a pregnancy care center, then go out and really care. If you're one that's supporting after abortion, then go out and find those that are hurting. If you are a part of the legislative process, then be loud, be vigilant. Every aspect. If you're one called to adoption, go adopt. If you're one just called to love, go volunteer, go give. We do more is what we do. We do more. We do what Frederick Douglass said. At a certain point, you got to get up from your prayer seat and get up and go to work. So we go to work.
Absolutely. Star, thank you so much for being with us. Really a blessing to be here with you, and thank you for what you do. We really appreciate it. Thank you so much. We're going to go back out now to Catherine Hadro out in the field. Hey, Catherine.
Hi, Tracy. So I'll just give you an update as we're making our way through. It looks as if other pro-lifers have tried, meeting up with this very small event. They were, chanting, and we're just kind of reminded this is really supposed to be a prayerful presence right now, so you can hear some singing right now. And joining me is Marjorie Dannenfelser, president of the Susan B. Anthony List. Marjorie, what's going through your mind right now?
Well, I'm looking around and hearing these beautiful prayers, and we see a sparse group of people because they're the leaders of the pro-life movement, but it is absolutely no reflection of the strength of the pro-life movement right now. And that pro-life movement is at the strongest point that it has ever been. It's not the usual tick-tock of presidency to presidency, executive orders back and forth. We have the courts in such a strong position, and we also have laws coming up to challenge Roe versus Wade from all over the country. We're very strong where it matters in the states. So that is my message of hope, and it's exactly where Susan B. Anthony List will be operating in the next couple of years.
I feel like you always have that optimism, you always have that hope that defines us really in our faith, in our Catholic faith. Marjorie, can you speak to the significance of this march happening the day after President Biden rescinded the Mexico City policy? You're such an expert on policy.
Well, I mean, one thing America is really good at is responding politically when there is a challenge, and this is how we get things right. This president has just passed down overturning the Mexico City policy, which 70% of America opposes, and well over 50% hate taxpayer funding of abortion, as they should, regardless of whether they're pro-choice or pro-life. So I think the contrast between yesterday, totally out of sync with America, and today, completely in sync with real America, is a beautiful thing, and I'm glad we're second. I'm glad we're coming right after it.
Yeah. Marjorie, I'm just thinking, here we are, we're holding a rose. This is not typical to the more recent March for Life. So what are your thoughts on this different tone the March for Life is taking on today?
Well, this march is unstoppable, and but it did feel like we were faltering this year until now. I mean, this is a throwback to a long time ago, 48 years ago, when they used to bring roses into Congress to hand out to legislators. So I feel like it's full circle, coming back to the beginning of the pro-life movement at a time where I really believe we're at a brand new pro-life movement. We're at the stage of the movement where we're actually coming into the wind. And it doesn't feel like that sometimes walking here, except if you look around, you see where the power comes from. It comes from our faith, and it comes from our doggedness to never stop. Never stop, not till every baby is saved.
I know we only have 1 minute left, Marjorie, but you spoke about, you know, where this all comes from, and we share that Catholic faith. Can you speak about how your faith informs your work?
Yeah, you know, God is never overwhelmed. And we live in D.C., where it's been kind of an overwhelming time. Families are overwhelmed all over the country, cities and towns, but God is never overwhelmed. He will waste nothing, none of this. He knows exactly what's happening. He knows how to use us. We just need to allow ourselves to be used, and we'll save lives.
Amen. And with that message, Tracy, back to you.
All right. Thank you so much, Catherine. And joining me now is David Beawright. He is the founder.
That was beautiful.
He's the founder and former CEO of 40 Days for Life. This year's march is a little bit different. David, and first off, thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate it.
It's a blessing to be here. Thank you so much, Tracy.
It's a blessing to have you. Obviously, this year's march is a little bit different, as we know. Disappointed for it, but you know the message is still the same. For those who maybe wanted to go, really wanted to go and participate, couldn't do that, what would be your message to them?
Yeah. Well, I share their disappointment because there's something special about coming together in person and being there to stand united as a pro-life movement and then to be recharged to go back home. But the first thing I would say is to understand that the board of directors and Jeannie Mancini and her team, they were really prayerful and discerning about this year's march, and they had to make a tough decision that none of us would want to have to make, but yet they did it looking out for protecting life, which is what the March for Life is all about. But the most important thing, we may be disappointed we can't be together in person, but we're gathered virtually, and there is still this small march representing us. But what happens at the March for Life is really to set the stage for the rest of the year. This day prepares us for the next 364. And even the mission of the March for Life is to unite, to educate, and to mobilize pro-life people in the public square to help end abortion. So what it's meant to do is to galvanize us to go and do things in our community to save lives. And we can do that. And today we should redouble our commitment to save more lives than ever before, to work harder than ever before, until that time when we can be back together to celebrate the progress that God is making through the pro-life movement.
That's so true. I want to get your take on the event so far this year. Obviously, as we mentioned, a little different. You're used to being there. What are your thoughts on things so far?
Yeah, as I look at the events that are happening, the rally, and I look at the small march, and I realize that though it looks different this year, it's a March for Life, but something that was really surreal, and I was talking this morning to Jeannie Mancini about it, the president of the March for Life, and I said, you know, in a way, this year, a lot of what we've had to go through with the pandemic and all these other things is go back to basics. Yeah. Christmas was much simpler for most of us this year, but we could get back to the basics of Jesus Christ, the reason for Christmas. And in the same way, when the March for Life was founded in 1974, when Nellie Gray and others came forward, they said we need to memorialize the tragic Roe versus Wade decision, and we need to make sure to come together to mourn and memorialize those lives that have been lost. And in a way, watching that solemn procession, it really brings us back to the basics of what the March for Life is about. So in a way, it brings forward that which is core and essential to the mission of the march, and that which we all need to do is recognize the 62 million lives that have been lost to abortion, and we need to solemnly remember those who have been lost, but also recommit to do something to protect those who are at risk even right now.
Absolutely. You know, we have probably about a minute left in this interview, but yeah, I do want to talk about this. You know, as we mentioned, the March for Life is always peaceful and it's always prayerful, and I know you founded 40 Days on Life, largely on the idea of a peaceful and prayerful presence. Let's talk about that and why it's so important in advancing our pro-life mission.
Well, absolutely. Well, violence never cures the problem of violence. And we recognize not only the injustice of abortion, but the violence of abortion. It violently destroys the life of a child. But the solution to that violence is not more violence. And we look at social reformers throughout history. Dr. Martin Luther King, he always raised attention around the injustice and the violence that was being perpetrated against African Americans, but he always pointed people towards the nonviolent solution. And as pro-lifers, we respect the dignity of every human life, and therefore we must be peaceful, but also as people of faith who recognize that every human life is made in God's image and likeness, fearfully, wonderfully made. We have to do it prayerfully, because ending abortion on our own, we can't do it. But with God, all things are possible.
Oh, absolutely. Well, David, thank you so much. We appreciate it.
Appreciate it.
All right, here with us now is Katrina Gallick, Director of Development for the March for Life. Katrina, thanks so much for joining us again. I understand that you first got involved with the March for Life when you were just a college student and you spoke at the March for Life rally. Tell us about that.
Yes, so I had the opportunity when I was in college at the University of Mary, which is in Bismarck, North Dakota, to be part of leading the March for Life that year. That was back in 2017, which feels like so long ago. We had the chance to carry the banner, which this year is being held by a few pro-life leaders, but typically during normal years, a college or a high school has the opportunity to represent the pro-life youth and to carry that banner. And so as part of that school, I had the opportunity to speak at the rally on behalf of pro-life young people. I know you heard from a student from Christendom College this year at the rally not too long ago. And so just was really blessed by the opportunity to be able to represent the pro-life young people who are the future of the pro-life movement.
Yeah, and Katrina, I know that you've been really open about your journey with paralysis. Can you share how that specific aspect of your life ultimately led you closer to God?
Yes, yes. So when I was in high school, I had a medical issue kind of come up out of the blue that left me paralyzed for a big chunk of time, and it was in that I really was invited to question my faith. I've been raised in a very pro-life, very Catholic family, big Catholic family, where a relationship with Jesus was something that was talked about very regularly. But it was in this experience of paralysis where I had to question for myself, is it true? Is he really there? Does he really love me? In that moment, what I felt was his absence. And so it was going through this journey that I learned how to look for Christ, especially in those moments where he didn't seem to be there. And I think in many ways it prepared me for the work that I'm doing now with the March for Life, to always look for Christ, to always look for where is God moving and what is we called to do next, even when the road ahead looks so grim. So many of the guests already today have spoken about the Biden and Harris administration and what that means for the pro-life movement. And so it's another opportunity to really look and see, all right, Lord, where are you calling us to work now? What does this new era of the pro-life movement look like? And to be open to, especially if that's not, what we had in mind before.
Absolutely. And thank you so much for sharing that story with us. What do you want to say to maybe a young person who may be watching and, their heart feels moved to get involved with the pro-life movement?
Yeah, so I would say, first of all, to recognize that this is your movement too, that the pro-life movement will only go forward when we have young people really take responsibility for this. You mentioned that there's over 63 million unborn babies that have been killed by abortion, and that's many people in my generation and in the generations younger than me. And so for the young people to recognize that we need you in this fight. And so look at what opportunities you have around you. Maybe there's a Student for Life chapter at your school. If not, consider starting one. Consider getting involved very actively now and not just waiting in the future for someone to ask, but instead take that initiative for the unborn, that this is your movement too.
Absolutely. Great advice. Thank you so much, Katrina, for joining us again. We really appreciate it. All right, now we're going to head back out to Catherine Hadro out in the field for us. Catherine.
Hi, Tracy. Joining me now is former NFL star and Super Bowl champion Benjamin Watson. You might recognize him. He was in that virtual rally with his wife, Kirsten, and he's walking here in the streets of D.C. Benjamin, what's going through your mind right now?
A lot of peace. There's a lot of peace right now. It's quiet. I think that Jeannie kind of set it up really well when she said, this is a time of prayer, a time of reflection, remembering why we're walking and who we're walking for. And even as we, think about where we are as a nation and our opportunity to change some of the things that we want to see. And also time just of togetherness and encouragement spiritually and uniting for life. All the way, as we say, from the womb all the way to the tomb. It's a time of unity.
Absolutely. This year's theme for the March for Life is Together Strong, Life Unites. I think you speak really beautifully about that need for unity. Your thoughts on the importance of this year's theme?
I love the theme. I remember when I heard it, when Jeannie told me about the theme, and specifically after what we've gone through in 2020. Look, we're in the middle of a pandemic. We've had economic upheaval. We've had political turnover. We've had racial unrest. So many different things have shaken us. The Bible says in Psalm 16:8, David says, "I've continually set the Lord before me. With him at my right hand, I will not be shaken." And right now we're shaken. And so the idea of uniting and that sort of collective force, I think, is very, very important to reinforce. I mean, you know, when it comes to life, there are so many justice issues that we need to address. And they all kind of converge and come together when we think about the life of image bearers of God. No matter what ethnicity they are, no matter what gender, no matter where they're from, we all have a role in fighting for each other in that way and uplifting that.
Amen. You know, Benjamin, your talk in the virtual rally was with your wife, Kirsten. You also have a podcast together. You have a big, beautiful family. Tell us about speaking about building up a culture of life with your own wife.
Well, you know, you look back in the book of Genesis, and obviously God makes man and woman, and he puts them together, and the two become one flesh. And ever since then, Satan has tried to do everything he can to destroy the family. And so part of us doing our podcast, Why or Why Not, is talking about, you know, really the importance of family, the importance of parents speaking to their children about issues such as abortion, such as justice issues, poverty, whatever it may be. How do we address our children as responsible, God-fearing parents who care about our families? How do we as husband and wives say, you know what, we don't get this thing right all the time. We've done podcasts and we've been in arguments. But you know what? Part of that is working through that relationship and being vulnerable and showing just how God can use a man and a woman who aren't perfect but who want to try to submit themselves to him.
That's so beautiful. I'm so grateful for your leadership. Thank you. Thank you for the beautiful talk during the virtual rally. You know, Tracy, right now it's very quiet here. It's very prayerful. It's walking slowly. It's nothing like I've seen before at the March for Life. But again, I think it really points us to the tragedy of why we are marching. We are marching because the tragedy of abortion. We'll talk to you again soon here from the streets of D.C.
Okay, thank you, Catherine. Thank you for all you do, too. I'm back here in the studio with David Bereit. And David, I know that you're a convert to Catholicism. You even discussed your story with Catherine. We're going to go right now and take a look at that interview.
There were three things that really led to my ultimately feeling led to enter into the Catholic Church. Number one was hearing God calling me consistently, particularly through an hour of adoration. The second thing was the faithful witness that my Catholic wife and Catholic children lived out right before my eyes, which attracted me. And third was getting to work alongside so many Catholic Christians who make up the pro-life movement and watching their witness and their example. And I wanted what they had.
I'd love to hear that. Tell us a little bit more about your reasons for conversion.
Well, I have been blessed my whole life to have been raised in a wonderful Christian home. My parents loved the Lord. My dad was actually a Presbyterian pastor, and I went to church every Sunday. In college, I was involved in a Bible church, but then I met a beautiful girl, and isn't that how stories usually go? And my now wife, best friend of 28 years, my wife Margaret. And Margaret was a lifelong Catholic, and our second date together was to Mass. And so watching Margaret live out this dynamic Catholic faith, as I described in that segment, was profound. And even as our children were baptized and raised in the church and the life they lead. I mean, my daughter is a novice with the Nashville Dominicans today, and my son loves the Lord and is involved with the campus ministry at George Mason with the Focus Missionaries. But as I mentioned in that segment, the pro-life movement is made up of the many parts of the body of Christ, but it is largely led by those of Catholic Christian faith. And as I worked alongside them and I saw the depth of conviction that they had, their faithfulness, but also the church that for 2,000 years has never wavered in her teaching about the sanctity of human life, that all Catholic social teaching is built on the bedrock principle of the dignity of the human person. And I saw, regrettably, some Christian denominations that have veered away from that foundational truth that is biblical, scriptural, but it's been there since Jesus walked on the earth. It's been there for all time since God created life. But I started to realize that that was the truth. So it wasn't in leaving where I came from, it was adding to. And it's been such a grace and such a gift to be received in 2018 into the church and to now have all those extra blessings of being a Catholic Christian.
That's so wonderful. I want to talk about the name that you chose for your confirmation name. It's one of my favorite saints. I don't want to tell everybody, so I want you to tell them why you chose this saint.
Well, one of the advantages of being a more recent person to come into full communion with the church is I had the blessing of being able to select St. John Paul II as my confirmation saint. And as I've followed his life, long before I felt called to come into the Catholic Church, I always admired what he went through in Poland, what he went through during World War II, what he went through under godless atheistic communism. And then as God rose him up as the leader for the time, and how he influenced the whole world, but always did it with love, always did it with compassion, always working to bring about justice and peace, and to do it in a Christ-like way, and recognizing that dignity of the person at the center of his entire pontificate. I was so inspired by his life, and to have been able to witness in my lifetime his life, that really inspired me to want to say, yes, that's who I would like as my confirmation saint.
I love it. And you know, it makes me think about what we're going through right now with the administration right now and the challenges that we're up against. Can we talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, I've met a lot of people who are very frustrated, despairing, discouraged right now because, yes, there's been a change in Washington, D.C., but what I always want to remind them is it's not most important what happens in the White House. What's most important is what happens in your house, because it's up to each of us to pray, ask God what he wants us to do, and then to act, to respond. If we help a mother in an unexpected pregnancy right now, if we help her to choose life and we're there to support her through that pregnancy and after her baby is born, we just ended abortion for that mother and for that child. And so rather than despair, we've been through tough times. Some of the greatest growth of the pro-life movement, the biggest explosive growth of 40 Days for Life when I was there, was during the Obama administration. And certainly that administration was very hostile to the cause of life. But I think for all of us to recognize, yes, look to the examples of great saints like John Paul, but also to look to the heroic people, the ordinary people who are out on the front lines of the pro-life movement. They're praying, they're sidewalk counseling, they're working at pregnancy centers. We can do that too. And if we have that kind of extraordinary faith, God can use us ordinary people to do amazing things to save lives. So each of us has a role, and with God, all things are possible, regardless of who occupies the White House.
Absolutely. I want to talk about you, going back to the organization that you started, 40 Days for Life. Tell us why you did it, and give us a little bit more background for those who may not, be familiar.
So I was living in College Station, Texas, and there was a local Planned Parenthood abortion center that had opened a few years earlier, and we had tried a lot of different things as a pro-life community, and I had left my job in the business world to run this little local pro-life group, but it seemed like everything we were doing wasn't enough. The abortion numbers were going up, it seemed like the Christian participation was going down, and out of desperation, we did what we should have done at the beginning: we prayed. And a group of 4 of us sat around a wooden table, and for an hour, 2 college students, one named Sean, another one named Emily, another woman who had just graduated from college, Mary Lisa, and we prayed for an hour and just said, God, what do you want us to do? And it was during that prayer that we felt convicted around the 40-day time frame that God uses to transform. Throughout biblical history, we see transformation happening in the world, but we felt that we needed to pray and fast, because with God all things are possible. We need to have a peaceful prayer vigil outside of the Planned Parenthood 24 hours a day, and community outreach, spreading the pro-life message to everyone around us. Little did we know at the end of that hour of prayer what we would launch in that one community. It would galvanize 1,000 people, but then it would spread to hundreds of cities across all 50 states and dozens of nations. And we've seen now hundreds of thousands of volunteers participate, 18,000 lives saved, 107 abortion clinics closing, and 211 workers leave the abortion industry, including Abby Johnson, who's walking down the streets of Washington, D.C. as a part of this March for Life. God is so much bigger than we are, and he has plans that are so much more exciting than we have, and through him we can change the world, but we have to do it with him, through him.
Absolutely. I'm wondering, do you have a message for our young people who want to get involved or who are already involved? What would you say to them, and what are the challenges they face, and how can they overcome it?
It's a great question. Last night I was speaking to a youth event at All Saints Parish in Manassas, Virginia, and it was 150 kids that were there. And what I said to them is, you can change the world. One person God can use. And I gave story after story, example after example of people that I've been blessed to meet and work alongside. Many of them are walking down the streets of Washington, D.C. today. But in every case, it was somebody that devoted themselves to God and to his will, and then they acted upon it. And that's my message to every young person is, don't think you have to have experience or titles or degrees. You can make a profound difference. You can save a life. You can change a community. You can change the world, because with God all things are possible. So rely upon him, ask him to show you your place, and then act upon it, and you'll see amazing things happen.
Absolutely. I love it so much. Thank you so much for that message, and God bless you. Thank you for what you do, David.
It's a tremendous blessing.
Thank you. All right, we're going to head back out to Catherine Hadro, who is live in the field for us. Hey, Catherine.
Hi, Tracy. Yes, we're continuing to make our way through the route in downtown D.C. And joining me now is Lauren Merce of Live Action. Lauren, you've been to many March for Life.
I have.
What's going through your mind right now in this very unique one that we're at?
It is very unique. It's actually encouraging that we're still doing it. I'm glad that the March for Life took the initiative to organize something that was small and reserved, and I'm super hopeful for next year that we'll be able to have the biggest march ever.
Yes, I agree. Now, for our viewers who are not aware, tell us about your work with Live Action and Live Action's specific mission.
Sure. So Live Action has the largest social media following for the entire pro-life movement, over 5.2 million followers. And we have the largest digital footprint for the pro-life movement, so we create videos, articles, and graphics that are educating on the humanity of the preborn child and the horror of abortion every single day online.
And that's so important to reach young people, isn't it?
Yeah.
To do it through that digital medium. And young people do have an important role in the pro-life movement.
Critical role. So the pro-life movement will not continue unless the youth all stand up and take a greater stance than ever before. This generation is the most compassionate, and they can be the most human rights justice warriors, right? So our whole this generation, the upcoming generation, has this drive to really stand for social justice, and we cannot have true social justice, we cannot have human rights unless they begin in the womb first.
Absolutely. You know, Lauren, for viewers at home who did not travel to Washington, D.C., cannot be here for this March for Life this year, how can they still be involved in the pro-life movement? I feel like I get that question a lot. How can I be involved?
That is a great question. So there's multiple different ways, of course. One of the best, one awesome way is to get up, every weekend if you can, and go pray outside abortion facilities in your own town. That is a great way to witness, a beautiful way to peacefully protest outside of abortion facilities. You can also donate to awesome pro-life organizations. There's many of them, and they're not able to do their work without donations. And then there's also so many great organizations to become involved in. So become an ambassador with Live Action is a great way. And just start digging. Look for ways that you find passionate, where you can put your skills and your voice to use in your own community.
Absolutely. Tracy, I just want to kind of comment to you as we're continuing to march. You can see the presence of the National Guard surrounding here. It's really surreal to see all these fences and to see this militarized presence here. We're starting to see some louder pro-lifers who have met up with our group here as we continue to make our way down for the March for Life. Lauren, can you just share, we only have a minute left, but just a message for our viewers, especially as we're entering this new administration, and a lot of people are very concerned.
Yeah, I think the concern is real, but I also think that sometimes when it feels darkest is when the light can shine the brightest. So now is the time more than ever that our voices can be louder, stronger, and that we can really make a huge difference. So don't give up. Keep building a culture of life, starting with ourselves, our families, our friends, and keep the culture of life starting from the grassroots up.
That's beautiful. Thank you so much. Tracy, back to you.
Okay, thank you so much, Catherine. We just saw Catherine out in the field. We were talking about youth, young people getting involved in the movement. Let's talk a little bit about, what we saw there with Catherine and your thoughts on that.
Oh, well, first of all, Catherine is amazing. Just watching how God has worked through her here at EWTN, Lauren and Lila at Live Action, and just realizing, what an example to young people. If they say, well, I look and, I see a gray-haired guy, David. Now I may not relate to that, but they can look at the young people out on the streets. They can look at those who are leading the way. Kristen Hawkins, Students for Life, so many other young leaders, Katrina and the various team members of the March for Life. So look to those who are going before you, but also chart your own course. Find your unique role. But what an inspiration, what a role model and example we have in both of those ladies we were just hearing from.
Yeah, absolutely. And another thing Catherine had mentioned was, there's a different presence this year. DC does look a little different. Can we talk about that, your thoughts on that?
Yeah, it's been a very difficult time for all of us, even as my wife and I were coming around to come here and looking at the barbed wire on the fences and the National Guard. And it reminds us that we're in a very dark time culturally. But I think going back to the point that Lauren was just making, when the darkness is the darkest, that's when the light shines. Where sin abounds, grace abounds all the more. So if ever there were a time that our culture needs to see something that, the reason we have those wires and the fences, the National Guard, is because of division, because of anger, because of hatred. And the beautiful thing about the gift of life, our theme this year, Together Strong, Life Unites. Abortion divides a mother and her child. Abortion divides a culture. Life unites a mother and her child. It unites community. It unites the many different parts of the body of Christ. It unites Republicans, Democrats, people who are independent. It is the cause that can bring us together. So if we want to look for where is there hope in the midst of this darkness, where is there hope in the midst of the tensions in Washington, D.C., we're seeing it of those peacefully walking up the street to memorialize those who've been lost, but to encourage us to save lives and make a difference right where we live.
Oh, 100%. And I think it's a beautiful testament that people are still out there and they're marching. You know, what would be your advice to folks when we talk about uniting for this cause? Any advice to folks right now who may be watching?
Yeah, I think when times seem to be going our way, let's say we have the person we want in the White House, or we have the right majority in the right legislative body, we kind of put our hope sometimes too much there. And when we suddenly realize that's no longer there, we have to put our hope back in God, which we should have had all the time along. And I'm guilty of this as well. But also we have to recognize that we cannot allow division amongst our movement to separate us. That is where Satan comes in through division. So we have to find unity. I last night was doing an event with Democrats for Life, and the lady who was introducing me, she is an atheist, she's a vegan, she is a Democrat, and I'm sitting here thinking the world would say we should be enemies because I'm a Catholic Christian, I like a steak, and you know I have more often voted for political people on the other side because of the cause of life. But yet this cause of life unites us, and together we can be stronger, life united. My entire pro-life movement, the theme throughout it has always been, as a volunteer, running a local group, starting and building 40 Days for Life, collaboration, because together we are stronger.
Absolutely, David. Thank you so much for the message. Thank you for being here with us today. Such a blessing to have you, and God bless you in all you do.
Thank you so very much.
Thank you. All right, we're going to check in again with Katrina Gallick. Katrina, thanks so much for joining us again. We appreciate it. I want to get your thoughts so far on what we are seeing in the march.
Well, yes, as so many people have said already, this march looks different. It is more solemn than in marches in the past, and much more small, just having leaders representing us. But it is also a time to recommit ourselves to the cause of life. You know, we're marching against something that's terrible, abortion, but we're marching towards something that is very beautiful, and that is life, and that is the joy of life. And so even though we're connected virtually this year, there still is a call for each of us to go and to do great things for life. And so it's really beautiful to see the leaders representing all of us. And again, it's a call for us to continue that march all year long.
Absolutely. Katrina, I want to ask you, and I want to get your take on this. Why is it important for the young people to get involved in this movement, and what would be your advice to them?
Yes, so the pro-life youth really are the backbone of the movement. We actually see by going through different studies that young people are actually the demographic most likely to be pro-life and to be changing their opinion towards life. And so we see that the pro-life movement really is winning the hearts and the minds of young people. So my advice to pro-life young people is to not be afraid to use your voice. Especially on college campuses, it can feel so hostile that there aren't other people that agree with you. But so many times we see that young people are pro-life, do believe in this, but maybe just aren't familiar with what abortion is, and then also sometimes have a fear of speaking out. And so I encourage young people to really be bold in this way and to educate yourself, and then be bold about educating your peers too about what abortion is and about the gift of life.
Great advice. I love that, Katrina. One last question before I let you go. You know, we've mentioned it seems like we're in such a dark time right now, but there is hope. Let's talk about that and how we can unite together.
Yes, well, there is always hope. We know that in the end, life will be victorious. And so we can have this joyful anticipation of victory in the end. And so we can keep that hope. And as was said earlier so beautifully, that in the darkest times, a light shines the brightest. And so I think we can keep in that hope. And also to know that there's a Marist poll that was just released this week that showed that life is winning in the court of public opinion, and that a majority of Americans do not support the extreme abortion legislation that we're seeing coming from Capitol Hill and now from the White House. That pro-life Americans support life at growing more and more every day. And so that gives a lot of hope too, that there is change that is coming, and now is the time to continue to march.
Absolutely, Katrina. Thank you so much. I'm glad you brought that up. We really appreciate you and all that you do. Thank you again. All right, we're going to check in with Catherine Hadro, who is out there in the field for us. Catherine.
Hi, Tracy. Joining me now is Sister Virginia Joy. And as you can see from her beautiful habit, she is with the Sisters of Life. Sister, so good to meet with you and speak with you. Can you tell our viewers about the Sisters of Life?
Sure. So the Sisters of Life, we're a religious community where we take a fourth vow to protect and enhance the sacredness of all human life. We were founded in 1991 by John Cardinal O'Connor, and we vow ourselves to the charism of life. This desire that everyone knows that they are good, that they are a wonder, unrepeatable, irreplaceable gift. And we work with women who are pregnant and in need, and some of them come and live.
In the Eucharist.
Some of them come and live with us.
Denied in the Eucharist.
And we had one baby whose mom lives with us, who delivered yesterday.
Wow.
And then we also have sisters full-time working with women who are suffering the effects of abortion in their life. So we call that our Hope and Healing mission.
You know, Sister, as you've said to me earlier in conversation, there really are the walking wounded right now. How can we as Catholics, as pro-lifers, really care for women who are wounded from abortion?
Yeah, I think it's so important. Even for my own story, it was really hearing the witness of a woman who had suffered, and which was so convicting to my own heart about, it's a hidden grief that we see, and I think we have to be really careful just about how we talk about life, and I think that's important, because often these women are really suffering what we call a hidden grief, and so they're in your churches, they're in your schools, they're your co-workers, and so we have to talk about the life issues in a really compassionate way, a way where there's always hope, that there's always new life God can bring out of anything. That's really key, yeah.
You know, something I've just been thinking about is this has been a really tough past year. It's been a really tough past month. A lot of people feel despair. Even on the abortion front, especially on the abortion front, considering of pro-abortion policies that, we're seeing. Can you just speak about, but God is here and God has a plan and God is in control.
That's right, yeah. Yeah, I think it's okay to recognize there certainly is a somber tone even here today and amongst all of us, and I think I think back to John Paul II, we're in the 25th year of Evangelium Vitae, and he says, the heart of the tragedy being experienced by modern man is a loss of the sense of God in man. And so, like all of us, our role is to recommit ourselves to our faith. What foundation are we standing on? And if it's not God and who He says I am and who He is, then yeah, we are going to be on shaky ground. But there is always reason to hope when we're people of faith. And I think God is in heaven. The victory has been won. But we get to be His pilgrims here on earth, really to fight the good fight. And we have to.
Yeah. And this is part of it. Even though the March for Life looks different this year, this is part of our fight against that and building up the culture of life.
Absolutely.
Sister Virginia Joy, thank you so much. God bless you.
Catherine. God bless you.
Tracy, back to you.
Okay, thank you so much, Catherine. And joining me now is Michael Warsaw, Chairman of the Board and CEO of EWTN. Michael, thank you so much for being with us right now. We're so grateful. As you know, of course, EWTN has been a long supporter of the March for Life, even when other networks really wouldn't show up for it. We found a clip from back in 1994 when March for Life founder Nellie Gray joined Mother Angelica, really highlighting that relationship. So let's take a look.
She's president of March for Life. And the March for Life, if you remember, you see that march every January 22nd, that it? Yes, ma'am. And last year she went against great odds because of the weather. But being the determined woman she is, they marched, even in the freezing cold. I think that manifested something to the nation that a beautiful day wouldn't have. These people care for God and His life in us.
That's so great saying that. I want to get your take on that and really what the march meant to Mother Angelica.
Sure. Well, it's great to see that. I remember that show actually. Two great women, amazing women. And Mother had just an amazing commitment to life, which she expressed time and time again through the years on her live show. It wasn't just something that she talked about every January around the March for Life. It was something that was a part of her show, day in, day out, week after week, year after year. And so I think the association between EWTN and the March for Life, is something that's been incredibly important. It was incredibly important to Mother. It's incredibly important to all of us now who carry on the mission after Mother. Our association with the March for Life really goes back to its very earliest days, and Nellie Gray was a frequent guest over the years from the founding of EWTN, and was frequently there with Mother Angelica promoting and talking about the life issues and talking about the March for Life. I recall even as early as the late 1980s, EWTN was televising the Vigil for Life and the masses surrounding the March for Life and many of those other events, and then ultimately that grew into our commitment to televising the march each year and the rallies and everything that surrounds this really significant annual event.
And we've been talking, obviously, the march is taking on a different look this year. That being said, I know it's still very important to the network to cover this. Can you talk about that?
Sure, absolutely. Like everything in this past year, it's just everything is different. And so we're all adjusting to that. But what is not different is the commitment to life and the commitment to this cause. And so even though the circumstances this year, because of both COVID and the other concerns around security and so forth, because those circumstances changed the way the march looks, does not in any way diminish our commitment and the commitment to the March for Life and the cause of life and presenting this event. I think that despite these times and despite the challenges of these times, it's incredibly important for us to continue that witness to life that we have made year in, year out, and that so many who are involved in the March for Life have done throughout these decades.
Yeah, speaking of challenges, I want to talk about the challenges we're facing right now with a new administration. Can you talk about that and our role as a network in building that culture of life?
Sure. Well, I think if you talk in terms of the mission of EWTN, our mission statement is very clear, that we exist for the advancement of truth. And the advancement of truth is defined by the magisterium of the Roman Catholic Church. So there is no time, I think, more appropriate for the mission of EWTN than these times that we're living in. Whether that's, the challenges that we all face from the COVID issues to the challenges that we now face in secular and civil society with the new administration and this shift that's now occurring in the civil space with regard to the issues of life. And it's clearly a significant issue at a time when you have a president who campaigned throughout on being a devout Catholic, whose staff and whose representatives still refer to him as being a devout Catholic, and who presents himself in that way. Yet, on the preeminent issue of life, President Biden unfortunately is not in alignment with church teaching and is completely opposite church teaching. And so I think it's important for us as a network, as we have always done throughout our 40 years, to witness to the truth, to speak the truth, to help people to understand what the church teaches about these critical issues of life, and to inform people about what the problems are with some of the stances and some of the things we're seeing that are coming out of the administration and the government in these times.
Yeah, we're going to talk a little bit more about that in just a bit. We're going to go right out now to Catherine Hadro, who is out in the field for us. Hey, Catherine.
All right. Hi, Tracy. Yes, here I am with Congressman Chris Smith. He's the co-chair of the bipartisan pro-life Congressional Committee, and you can hear God Bless America behind us here at the Supreme Court. Congressman, you put out a really strong statement in response to President Biden rescinding the Mexico City policy yesterday. Can you just address the significance of that?
Sure. Unfortunately, the pro-abortion organizations are working overtime around the world to do just what this Supreme Court did in 1973, legalize abortion on demand right up until birth, with no conscience clause, no anything, all over the world. And unfortunately, under Joe Biden, he reversed Trump's enhanced Mexico City policy. It's called the Protecting Life and Global Health Assistance Policy, which means that we will be giving money to Planned Parenthood and all of these organizations all over the world whose mission is to legalize abortion on demand. I mean, it's just such a terrible, terrible thing that he did just yesterday. And, you know, he used to understand that abortion was the taking of human life. He used to be against funding, and I put that into my statement before the March for Life. But now, 180 degrees, you got the most powerful man in the world, now the abortion president, Joe Biden, against the innocent unborn child who is defenseless and needs an advocate, not an adversary.
The significance is striking that everything yesterday, and here we are today, remembering the tragedy of Roe versus Wade, hearing at this very solemn March for Life. You've been to many March for Lives.
Everyone but one.
Everyone but one. You knew the founder, Nellie Gray. Can you just speak to the unique nature of this year's March for Life?
Oh, the unity here is amazing. The unity in the pro-life movement is extraordinary. We've been here before. You know, when both Obama and Clinton became president, they had pro-life majorities in the House and the Senate, and they got some gains for the culture of death, which we then reversed. We just have to be double down and pray, fast, and work very hard in these coming days, weeks, and months. And again, I couldn't be more disappointed in Biden. You read his previous statements, what he wrote to some of his constituents way back. He was against funding. He said he was against abortion, and now he is the abortion president.
And he is Catholic. You are a Catholic congressman.
Yes.
That makes it all the more offensive.
Well, I listened very carefully to Archbishop Nauman's wonderful speech at the Basilica sermon, and he made it very clear, you know, that it is a gross disconnect between saying you're a Catholic and someone, because it's a tenet of our faith, but it's also, above all, a human rights issue. People of no faith at all can be pro-life and should be pro-life. Birth is an event that happens to all of us. It's not the beginning of life. And if you look at the methods of abortion, dismemberment, decapitation, these are horrific acts of violence, and they stay concealed. They stay cloaked, and now it has to be exposed. You know, and I do believe, you know, this is the people here are the leaders of the pro-life movement around the country. They all bear significant sacrifices in what they do in trying to defend life, but it's all about selflessness, caring for the weak and the most vulnerable.
That's it. And thank you for that reminder that we need to fast, we need to pray. Yes. Congressman Chris Smith, God bless you. Thank you for your pro-life leadership. Absolutely. Tracy, back to you.
Okay, thank you so much, Catherine. Michael, I'd like to get your thoughts on Catherine's interview with Congressman Smith and what he had to say.
Sure. I think one of the things that stood out for me was when the congressman was talking about the unity of the pro-life community and the unity of those who support life. I mean, over these past many weeks now, we've heard unity. In fact, I wrote a piece in the National Catholic Register recently about the issue of unity and the idea that we hear the president in his inaugural address talking about unity. We hear from the Congress. We hear from virtually every corner of society. We need to come together. There needs to be unity. And that's a wonderful sentiment. And it's a wonderful goal for us to try to achieve that unity. But unity cannot come at the expense of compromising our most deeply held beliefs and principles. If by unity someone means, well, you need to give up what you believe and come on board with me, otherwise, you know, we're not, you know, there's no unity. Well, that's not true unity. That's not true unity. And so I think that's a word we hear so much of these days. It's a word we're going to continue to hear. But I think we have to be very careful about that. And I thought Congressman Smith's statement about the unity within the pro-life community is very important, because that's absolutely true. Within the pro-life cause and within the pro-life community, people are unified. There is unity, and there is a commitment to the cause, and that no matter how difficult the circumstances might be, no matter how tough the battle might get, I think the pro-life community is committed to the cause and the issue of life. I think often of that phrase that's attributed to Mother Teresa, that God doesn't ask us to be successful; He asks us to be faithful. And I think that's important for all of us in the pro-life community, and all of us who are engaged, particularly in the work that we do of evangelization. God is calling us to be faithful, and we need to remain faithful, and we need to remain faithful and committed to these principles and to the principle of life.
Absolutely. We are definitely stronger together. I want to ask you, kind of jumping off of that, let's talk about our mission here at EWTN and really now during this time, how important it really is.
Absolutely. It's certainly since the pandemic began, it has been really amazing to me and very humbling to me to see the reactions that we've had from people all over the world who have turned to EWTN during this time. First and initially, perhaps because they could no longer go to Mass in their church, and so they came to us seeking Mass on Sunday or daily and devotions, and that's built as the time has gone on, and so virtually every platform that EWTN has, both here in the United States and all around the world, has seen this exponential increase of people turning to us for the content that we provide, and telling us how much of solace it's been, and how much of an anchor it's been for them in these difficult times. And certainly for us in the United States, as we went into the presidential election cycle and everything that's happened through that and recently, these are very, very unsettling times, very, very dark times, as others before me have talked about. But I think EWTN has remained for so many people, and so many more people around the world, that beacon of light, that beacon of hope that people need in these very, very difficult times. And that's our mission. I think you could say in many respects, that EWTN was created by God for a time such as this.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I love when we get those emails on a personal note, and seeing those emails from viewers and what they have to say, even people just watching maybe for the first time.
Exactly. No, exactly. And yeah, Mother Angelica always took great delight in hearing those stories of, people in the most unusual of circumstances who perhaps stumbled upon her live show, or who stumble upon one of our programs today, and that becomes a spark, and God uses that moment to bring about this incredible conversion and change of life, and that's the grace of God, and that's how He's used EWTN for these 4 decades.
Absolutely, we're blessed to be here for sure. All right, we're now going to go back out to Catherine Hadro, who really has been our eyes and ears for us on the streets in D.C. Catherine, how are you? I'm curious, what stood out to you about this year's March for Life, and what do you think that you'll hold on to the most?
Wow, Tracy, here we are at the Supreme Court, and it's totally fenced off, unlike any other year that I've been to the March for Life. What's going to stand out is the fact that it had a completely different tone. I'm so used to the packed streets, tons of young people, lots of singing and chanting. This year it was very quiet. I feel like the interviews I was doing was oftentimes the only conversation on the street so frequently. It was so solemn, it was so prayerful. I'm hearing prayers to my left, singing to my right now. People here this year in particular seem to really be thinking about and praying about and mourning the tragedy of abortion. So that's just what is going to stay with me. There was one moment very early on, shortly after we started marching, the small group of pro-life leaders where a bigger group of pro-lifers joined us, and they started singing and chanting, and I thought, okay, is this going to disrupt what was envisioned for today? But then they quieted down, and it continued to be very solemn and reverent for the remainder of the march.
Well, Catherine, I also want to find out, what did it feel like for you to be out there as one of the pro-life leaders really representing the moment? And I want to tell you, we are all so proud of you.
Oh, well, I've been listening to the program in my ear, Tracy. What a beautiful broadcast. And I will say the broadcast changed a lot of times as this announcement from the March for Life came 2 weeks ago that it was becoming virtual. But in regards to today, what an honor. This has got to be the greatest honor of my time at EWTN Pro-Life Weekly, to be here on this very significant and historic March for Life in its own right. And just as you and Mr. Michael Warsaw were just discussing right now, the mission of EWTN and Mother Angelica's vision, this is an honor for me, but it's really an honor for the network. The representation for the contributions this network has done in building up a culture of life in the pro-life movement.
Absolutely, Catherine. It really is an honor and a blessing. We mentioned this before. Things really do look different in D.C. this year. There was increased security. That was one of the changes. Did it change anything at all for the march?
I will say I did end up feeling completely safe throughout the entire march. There were a big presence of Knights of Columbus guarding us throughout. There was police presence in the front and in the back. And even just in walking through Washington, D.C., as I was saying earlier towards the beginning of the broadcast, it really is a militarized presence. I mean, it was pretty surreal to see so many National Guard soldiers standing on the sides of the streets. And again, here we are at the Supreme Court, and it's fenced off. And we're not at the front of the Supreme Court like we typically are every year for the March for Life. So it definitely felt different this year. But I fortunately did feel safe and secure. And I think it was Benjamin Watson who said, everyone, you could feel the unity among the pro-life leaders. Congressman Smith said that as well. But there was this great sense of unity among the pro-life movement here, and us all recognizing the significance of this day.
Yeah. Catherine, we have probably about a minute or so left, a little more. How do you think the 2021 March for Life will be remembered? How will you remember it?
Well, I think this is one that's going to stand out. This is the 48th annual March for Life, but this one, there will always be that footnote. There will always be an asterisk about this was the year the March for Life went virtual. I don't think this is going to be the case next year. I really don't. The March for Life, they were disappointed it went virtual as well. They worked so hard all year to put together a big rally and big event, but that's what the circumstances required this year. So I think this is going to be a unique year that stands out on its own. In a way, here I am holding this rose that was alluded to earlier. In the very beginning of the March for Life years, they would carry roses and bring them to the members on Capitol Hill. This rose is a symbol for the unborn child. The red represents the tragedy of abortion, but also the joy of life. So I think this will be one for the history books, Tracy, and it was an honor to be here.
Oh, Catherine, then thank you so much. Thank you for what you do. We really appreciate it. Catherine Hadro, host and managing editor of EWTN Pro-Life Weekly. Thank you again.
God bless.
All right, Michael, thank you so much for joining me today. Really
my pleasure. My pleasure. Thank you. And my thanks to Catherine as well for not just today, but for the ongoing witness to life that both of you exhibit in your programs on EWTN.
Oh, thank you, Michael. It's an honor and a blessing, and we're blessed to be here for sure. And thank all of you for watching. We really appreciate it. That concludes EWTN's complete televised coverage of the 48th Annual March for Life. Now, even though the March for Life really did look a little bit different this year, EWTN was still here, and that's because the tragedy of abortion cannot be forgotten. On behalf of everyone here at EWTN, thank you so much for watching. I'll be back later on tonight on EWTN News Nightly with complete coverage of today's March for Life events. Until then, we leave you with a scene of the Supreme Court from today's March for Life. God bless you all.